Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear viewers. This is the third day of our international conference dedicated to prospects and challenges of sustainable and eco-tourism in Russia. And for the third day, we are discussing different aspects of this agenda. Of course, new issues are raised, and it feels like for 3 years we didn't had a sufficient vision which should be the model within which framework we would analyze things. And when we consider the Russian society and economy and government and even private stories, really we see that in many ways we do not have methods behind many decisions, and this is something which disturbs when we want some support to rest on some basis and understand what is happening. For example, in terms of sustainable tourism, which scientific model, which mathematical system could be applicable. So today, let us dedicate 1.5 hours to that. And I'm introducing to you the Director General of the Research Center of Promising Interdisciplinary Research called IDEA, Mr. Akaki Melikadze. And my question to you, Arkaki, is do we have any clear rules in taking decisions, rules supporting decisions? It's a good question. It's a good question, and it's quite sophisticated. Perhaps on the one hand, in research and in science, it is quite typical that researchers, scientists face the need to discover solutions and take decisions related to complicated issues. And quite often, this is associated with how to raise funds and resources for such solutions. And today, it's a growing awareness globally and also in Russia at the top level of government that funds need to be dedicated to research and science. How much should be sufficient? I think that we need a particular discussion on the topic of how to conduct research. And many research institutions and institutes, they fight with issues related to methodologies. Our research center and myself in particular, I belong to the community of physicists. And it happened so that I associated myself with the community of environmentalists and decided that we could put together certain approaches and work out methods that would help research and solutions in the environmental sphere. And it is clear now, since I started approaching it from this point, that the issues, the agenda, they're quite complicated. Well, this is the third day. You are for the first time a part of this conference, right? This is the third day. Which key issues have you identified on the agenda as a researcher, as a scientist, but also as a person who would like to suggest some practical solutions? What do you feel are the greatest key points raised here? Well, I think that so many interesting issues were raised, and I would ask these questions to those presenters and participants who belong to the environmental community, to the tourism community, who face these issues on a daily basis. But I have the view from a side, and I'm curious about the combination of the interests on the part of business and perhaps even tourism industry, because now we understand tourism is an industry, first of all, an industry where investments are very important, where awareness of how to make them cost-effective is also important, and the vision of future trends is very crucial. But on the other hand, the industry as such has a mission to provide to our population and our guests to feel like a part of the bigger world, because we have really very unique landscapes. We are rich in nature reserves. And the industry itself, I mean the tourism industry, is now concerned with the balance that we need to preserve when we offer visits to these reserves and with the approaches that would help us to sustain the biodiversity and to enhance the environmental friendliness of routes encompassing nature reserves. But on the other hand, there are members of the environmental communities, and I think this is a unique community indeed, the community involving not only researchers but also just common people, activists, driven by the ambitions to protect something which is really dear to their heart. And of course, they play a great role because they identify, detect, and point at the issues that deserve immediate solutions and long-term decisions. And the thing is to organize the entire process that would help both sides of this challenge, the providers, but also those who are defenders of the nature tourism products, and to help them understand each other and to find the mutually beneficial positions. And from my status, I tried to look at this from the bird's eye view, and with my background in mathematics and physics, I think that this is quite challenging. Okay, then I have the question. You have identified two parts of the same agenda, but there are also other sides, other stakeholders. Which scientific methods could help the balance or harmonization of concepts and help speak the same language at least, so that the economic parameters would be understood and clear to all the stakeholders, so that their common language, the language of finance, the language of environmental studies would be perceived in a similar way. Well, I think that the methods do exist, and I would call them not the methods, but the principles. And the core principle is the principle of transparency, because every time that someone suggests a solution, it can be perceived as a solution, but on the other hand, it can be perceived as the lack of solution. And so transparency is very important. And when we have brainstormed certain issues and suggested certain possible solutions, we were trying to make them as transparent as possible. The second principle would be the right organization of the dialogue involving the government structures and bodies like the Ministry of Environment and the laboratory, which is in control of the quality of water and soil. So this is a big ecosystem in our country, and in my opinion, the right structuring, the right organization of interaction of all the parties involved is really of crucial importance. There is a demand for that. And as a person who has entered this quite recently, I feel that quite often the questions I asked by the answers are not provided or are not perceived. And if the questions are left without the answers, then we should at least work out certain mechanisms that would lead to these answers in future. But you have said that you have recently joined these discussions. But supposing somebody comes up to you as a researcher and says, like, for example, a director of a nature reserve comes up to you and asks, well, could you please help us estimate the capacity, the carrying capacity, the flows, and what needs to be done to manage them? Well, there are known methods, and this is the substantial part of work of any nature reserve. And having communicated with management of several health reserves, having read lots of publications, I have the impression that the scope of work which is in progress, including the research work conducted by the reserves, it is impressive. But on the other hand, not everything can be raised and studied and resolved by the reserves themselves. And in a similar manner, we can see the concerns of the tourism industry. They also cannot do everything all by themselves. And many tourism operators, on their own initiative, I could give the example of the Rosahutor Resort, which is a very good case, which has arranged its own special department, division dedicated to environmental studies. And they also cooperate with the local educational and research community. So they see where the issues stem from, and they strive to tackle them. But there is a question of resources, the question of funds, and quite often, I do not mean this particular region, but at large, the origin of funds is not obvious. For example, a reserve which conducts certain research is supported by some funds, and unfortunately, the results of this research are not available beyond this research. And the budgets dedicated to research, they do not oblige to share the outcomes of this research. And just imagine that a resort and the manager of the reserve do not understand each other just because of the lack of this exchange of research information. And I think that communication would help a lot. It will prompt more balanced solutions. So I think the key issue is how to organize this and who will take the initiative, who will be in charge of putting them together, this interface. So let us set the question to the laboratory or the research institute or center whether they honestly feel that there is an interest, public interest or professional interest to their research. I think that it feels like research is the kind of outside of the main agenda of the industry. And though it feels like when the communication happens, people eagerly listen to each other and are ready to step forward, but we need some kind of a systems approach to it. And if this becomes a habit, then we will move forward in our research and finding and implementing the solutions much quicker and in a more efficient way, because knowledge quite often belongs not to the mind of a particular scientist or even a laboratory, but they live in the community. This knowledge is in the community. It belongs to the community. And the question is which competences could be added to this community and could be helpful for research. So this is the objective of any head of the research team, and even at the federal level also, those who are in charge of science and research development. So they need to intensify such interfaces, and I think this is an objective. I think over recent 5 years we've been much involved in digitalization. Whatever can be digitized is digitized, but it feels there is a question whether the environmentalists and nature protection specialists are next to some laboratory. So how this can be arranged so that some solution could be found through digitization and other modern approaches, so that the research would be equipped with more data, for example. What can help to set more clear objectives and find more clear means? Well, a very good question. Yeah, it feels like we have digitalized everything long ago, but let me share the case. So the case from my experience, I always want to rely on my experience, because apart from my research center, I'm also an employee of the project office realizing the strategic development in the Russian Federation, and I could briefly talk about the directorate of different projects that are developing as strategies of Russia. So there are lots of grants, there are lots of funds dedicated for research in Russia. And it would seem that if digitalization can put everything digital, make everything digital, then, well, you can discover that after digitalization, still many things do not work as they had been expected to work. And what does the management of a center do? So they have introduced a very smart system of artificial intelligence, which processes big data, communicates and establishes communication with lots of researchers. And it's a big system based on big data. And this system is aware of the location of competencies of a certain kind within certain laboratories. And when there is an order for some research in a particular topic or theme, on the basis of this big data system, there is the search of these competencies, or in other words, of the right researchers who could be useful. And the system indicates that these particular experts are the best minds who could contribute. And they're involved often remotely. Even before COVID-19 pandemic, they were remotely often involved, and this system worked quite efficiently. There are even KPIs of the efficiency of this system. For example, the cost of the system of organization of the scientific expertise, the cost of the program itself, or the value of the so the value of the program is perhaps the lowest compared to many other programs. But I mean, the research programs have the value that is more cost effective. So in other words, digitalization is not the solution itself, but the right organization of how it can serve the purpose is the answer. So if somebody takes an initiative, the Ministry of Nature or some other body, perhaps some governmental body, this scope of issues which is faced by the community in tourism industry would be resolved. So we are looking forward to some initiatives, but it wouldn't be right to be idle waiting for these outside initiatives and complain that unfortunately the system has been constructed and available. So I think that if there is a pilot project that could be an attempt at least to build such a system, we can see whether it can become the working instrument in finding the solutions for reserves, for resort clusters, and other stakeholders. And this, as soon as a question or an issue arises, then for everyone it will be clear within this system who could be the source of information, who could be the one body which could structure the possible answers and resources and outcomes available within this system. And after that, more specific research projects could be ordered with a particular team of researchers who could be the right minds to add to the capacity of this research activity. Thank you very much. Dear friends, now my invitation is to all those present here, but also to the online viewers. Let us ask questions. Please, you're welcome. I encourage you. But before we have the questions, I would like to say that the initiative should come from the bottom, from the grassroots, right? I don't think that one should exclude another, because when we considered how the system was built, when I'm talking about the Directorate of Research Programs, it was not the top-down initiative, because it is very easy to formally comply with the requirements brought from above. But the researchers did not follow this formal approach. They involved the IT experts who knew how to use the right technologies to the right purpose, and the big scope of research was facilitated by them. I'm not going into detail right now because we all read mass media and we understand the scope of objectives set for them. But what they could. So what are the main objectives that the scientific society can assist with? I think that for many professionals from the industries, they do not really know the tool set, and a lot of innovations, they are born right now at this moment. So where could we implement them? And if you look at them, what can be sold right now? Not from something traditional that reserves are used to, but maybe from something new, from something that is born right now. I'll break my answer into two parts. The artificial intelligence is used for the organization and design of the process very often. And mainly, this is the nature of the scientists themselves. We look at those designing the process, at our scientific administrators, from let's say, a hill, from the top of a hill. And for them, it's a routine work. But this design of the process, to make sure it's efficient, not to spend all the funds on organization itself, on staging. And I here brought the examples. Namely, we now search and we choose the closest variant geographically in order to have the best efficiency and the best quality. So in order to construct this process, it's not easy. And therefore, artificial intelligence is used to build it in a right manner, to make the structure right, to build it, to create, to design it right. This project management system in large corporations is the environment where the artificial intelligence goes. This is very brief. And second part of my answer is the following. In the environmental challenges and tasks, and here let us get back to physics, we call them complex systems. Why are they complex? Because they have a lot of important parts. And we, in physics, we work historically with the systems that are simple. And here we mean that we cut all the
wrong things and we use and leave only things that we need. But now we face the system where we have these complicated models and we cannot extract anything. You take out a particle and then the whole system is ruined. You cannot do this anymore. And the system starts having new characteristics and new qualities, and therefore you cannot take out any part. Therefore, any environmental system is a complicated system, and here I can bring numerous examples. And we know how we violated something in the system and the balance was ruined. Let's say the habitat is empty after that, and the inhabitants, they leave the system, the ecosystem. Another thing, this change of climate, we speak about the difference of 1-2 degrees, but it's a very strong change and big change to the system that can experience completely different results after that. So we start with these very small amendments, and then it will lead to large changes in ecosystem, including climate change. So we need to understand the nature of such systems, how they operate, and to forecast. And indeed, it's a complicated task. And let's step aside a little bit from the main topic. But if such tasks become transparent, at least from the side of reserves and protected areas where they arise, because nobody knows things better than those working with these issues and tasks right there on sites, on sports, the professionals that work with them. So if they place the task, if they set the objective, and if they draw the attention of those dealing with complicated large systems in order to bring their contribution and support of the artificial intelligence, then we may have a new dimension and direction of the scientific research. Well, I understand you very well, and I'm sure that the audience asks, what kind of problems can I solve with the help of science? All right, we have a question. May I kindly ask for a microphone to be given? Good afternoon. Alexander Krenkel from the Institute of Geography of the Russian Academy of Sciences. I have two questions. The first one is, you've mentioned digitalization on making the decisions on whom to send and to align the scientific support in the field of national parks and reserves. Am I right? Yes, you are right. I've mentioned this part. And then right out of this, this following question from my side. Don't you think it's more wise to give more attention to digitalization of the reserves themselves? Because when we get there to the reserves, they don't even have zoning maps in digital manner. In order to use the algorithm and big data, in fact, you need the ecosystem of data, and the reserves, they lack it, as well as the national parks. They don't have it. They don't have digital databases. In many cases, the decision-making system based on digital data is lacking. So the decisions that should be made based on digital data, with understanding that this digital data is having gaps, then that means that we don't have right outcomes and right decisions. That's what we face in agriculture. They don't have digital mapping, and still we try to manage this system. So there are huge gaps. And the second question, I am quite concerned by your statement that the decisions can be made based on the machine approach and machine designed structures of decision making. So you've mentioned the complicated, complex systems, and if you said the same, that if you extract any parameter, then you ruin the system of the decision making, and the outcomes are wrong, and therefore it's a non-linear process. And then the sociologist from the US says that if you use this meter in managing an assessment of social processes, and you base this on numerical data, then you increase the corruption impact, and then you violate the social process that you planned to manage. Do not you think that use of such systems in this type of decision making is way too premature? Wonderful question, wonderful. I want to take the second question first. The artificial intelligence is useless and even harmful if it is used in absolutely fully automated mode. Therefore, there is a directory of scientific research, and this is why we manage the process, not the computer with the name Einstein to solve these issues. Of course, it's a huge amount of work and with human involvement. But we need to understand that people that are involved in this work, they have a huge experience and background, and they understand the specifications and nature of this process, and they base their decisions and drawbacks not only on data but on the feeling of the system. So right you are, and this is a hazard, and we know it and we face it. And the fully automated systems should not be the flagship of this sphere. As for the creation of databases and implementation in preserves and protected areas, it is a great pain. From what I've heard within the conference, at this conference, and I've read a lot, and I studied the materials from the previous conferences, and I studied the presentations of environmental professionals and experts. It's a pain, and we first need to understand what systems we deal. Secondly, we need to understand what to do with them. Let's imagine, and I want to invite you to a dialogue here. Yeah, I then need a microphone. So let's imagine we have enough money to solve this task of registers and registries. So the head of the reserve has enough money, and they want to come up with a catalog with a registry. And we understand that every part of the reserve or a natural site, all of them, they have a lot of parameters. What should be included in the registry, in the database? Because parameter is something that can be and should be measured, but it's not one-time expenditure. We need to control the process, the data, and costs. So we need to assess what is important. We need to set the priority. Okay, so you invite me for a discussion, as far as I understand. All right. Okay, all the national parks are very different, and we explore and enjoy and witness different things. But as part of this artificial intelligence culture, we speak about dynamic and variative parameters that will depict this system, including the elements of monitoring and the basic information that they describe. For many, except for very small and specific national parks or reserves that may have the territory of 30 hectares, on the whole, we have quite a standard set of parameters, of landscape parameters that we must monitor, including the systems of monitoring using drones and filming. And we need to come up with special set of parameters included in the database, like routes and numbers and figures. So basically, we can come up with a quite list of basic parameters that should be needed by everyone in the system and should be used. So we can start with this, and it is needed in the Russian Federation. And we understand that we face some challenges such as carbon footprints and things like that, and emissions. And even Chinese partners 15 years ago got to know about the system, and they started registration of the carbon emissions, and they are ready. The moment the state will take this step and come to business and say, hey, now we need your figures and we'll monitor and control you and assess your activities, they say, well, we are ready because for within 15 years we've been doing monitoring. So we are not there yet. So we need to come up with something like this, with comprehensive system, with right meters, parameters, but we need to set the list of parameters to bring to everyone, to all the players of the system, and they will be ready to present it when needed. And it's about the carbon emissions and green economy. And basically, this baseline requirements is very basic and due and is used in the industry, in the sphere, and good for all the reserves and protected areas. So they need to come up with proofs to help the economic activities in order to prove they are safe, they are best, they are environmentally friendly, they are green. So they need to prove their activities and operations that they're good enough and they comply with all the requirements that will be imposed even maybe in future, not here yet. So for their sustainability, they need this database, they need these parameters, these sensors, these meters to prove their figures and their right compliance. Okay, I understand you. So I mean that we need to come up with a uniform, kind of a uniformed digitalization and to provide it to the reserves and national parks. I think this is a must, and we should have started it 10 years ago. I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. And after I agree with you, I will think about us, and here I speak on behalf of the scientific managers. So I will think, what can we help you with? Because all the issues that you described, indeed, we need to solve them. And we are falling behind the right time, because 10, 20 years ago, we were to do it. And right now, we understand that we lost 20 years, and that's why now we start losing 5-6 billion euro per year. And this is just the beginning of the process of pathetic going down. And Russia is the largest system of Eurasian eco-massive. We are a donor of environmental services, and this must be reflected in our system of protected areas, national parks, and reserves. So we must come up with this basic line. But now we need to ask ourselves how, because as a result, our largest environmental system may face this situation when we'll be owing the world, that the world will come up to us and say, hey, you owe us. We send you fines for what you do because we were not ready on time. Thank you very much, and I absolutely agree with you.
I will sign under each word you said, and I think that we should start right now. Let's start. And I think that we have to set the question how this all can be made, but not just made, but made to the maximum efficiency. Well, we can also discuss it in a private manner, but if you're allowed to continue right now, then I would say that A, it would be sufficient to make a complementary program or the list, a register of something which needs to be digitalized on behalf of the protected area, each protected area. And this does not cost much money because GIS can be the base, and the great amount of work already available in the GIS system. So we can search for what has been contributed into the geoinformation system in Russia, and we would identify that most of the data needed already is available and should be then channeled into one particular system. And the second suggestion is that, of course, it's not our level to plan or discuss it, but I would suggest that there is a need in the program of instrumental observation, which can be arranged, again, uniformly, according to one standard approach, and we can borrow such approach from somewhere in the world, because we're not alone and somebody has already done it. So borrowing is not a fault. Well, but now we understand that there is full compliance and understanding, but who should be the driver of that all? The state, but what the state is busy with many things, and major business is now carrying losses, and starts making estimations, but still they have other concerns. If you ask me, I personally think that the existing situation of the government management and social mode of life in Russia should be analyzed. And unfortunately, only major corporations now start estimating their losses. But as for the government, so there are lots of vice ministries who are concerned with their own vested agendas. But people who already carry economic losses, they understand that in a year, 2 or 3 or 5 years or 10 years, they will understand that we would be blamed. We would be called environmental fascists or something like that. So, well, do you think that they should be taken the initiative by business? I think that one does not exclude another. We should be aware of the top-down approach of failing, not because ministries do not do something right, but because they don't understand how to do it right, and they are not at the grassroots. Business takes over because they do understand. So it takes to show to the ministry what needs to be done and how. Well, there are examples. There are bad cases like the Central Biospheric Reserve, which is the UNESCO heritage site. There are other national reserves that are models to follow. So what it takes now, we need a driver. We need the will, and the driver or the drive who would be pushing ahead such approaches. So I think that it takes just to take the initiative, but there are models that we can borrow from other parts of the world. There is also the issue of responsibility. I would say that the state itself is a very difficult system, so many people just fail to understand it. Tatiana Meshenkova from Rostourism. We're also raising here very important issues, and the problem is in communication. I think that in tourism, we need to base things on fundamental things. First, fundamental research, and then some more different level of approaches. But now what we are discussing here comes down to the following. There is the ministry, there is the scope of issues that is the responsibility and authority of the ministry, but also tourism. And the third block is the research, interministerial, and we need a coordinator, some organization which would be an interface for all the stakeholders. But of course, the government needs to be the initiator, because this objective needs to be set from the top, from above. And quite not often the ministry or some other government body doesn't understand what is happening in science and what has been achieved and how this can be implemented and what sort of interaction with practitioners is important to make it instrumental. So I understand what you are discussing, and why we need this vector and why it is right, and we on our behalf would support it, but we need somebody to take up the initiative, colleagues who would raise this as the agenda. Tatiana, and to which extent would you be ready to cooperate with some research institution that has conducted some research on the order or request of some major business? Don't you see the contradiction that if you take decisions based on the research which was conducted by some private researchers or teams on the request of some private businesses? You see, there is some experience of experts. We are oriented at the expert community. Not one organization is beyond each decision. We have some expertise generated by some board representing several players in the research community. For example, Moscow State Lomonosov University, the Faculty of Recreation, where they have accumulated lots of research and they have their reports, and so we involve them and we make stake on their opinions. Here at this conference as well, we see the meeting place for experts, but we need the real dialogue. So meetings are not sufficient. We need to carry out the dialogue in this direction. Thank you very much. So we come back to the issue of the dialogue and transparency, and unfortunately transparency is still lacking. What can be done? Well, I said that this transparency is lacking in a more applied manner. I mean, when it comes to some practical decision whether to develop something or not develop, build or not build. But what we have started discussing here is the systems approach, the bigger picture, the bigger landscape for things to happen. And let us put forward the proposal of our conference and escalate it to the government, and perhaps the measures would be then taken from the top. I cannot answer for the entire research community, but I think that we will try to give prompts who would be also involved in this process, like the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Research. If they hear us, perhaps we could. Well, let me add. The issue is not to waste what we have. Why the scientific approach is needed? Because when we think about tourism development and land development, area development, without research we could really make things worse. And that's why we have to plan the development but sustain and preserve what has been already available. Well, in my opinion, the thing is, the dialogue, transparency, that's wonderful, but who will put people around the table to discuss? So I don't understand at the moment who will be the driver, the one who will drive this change, who will call the participants of the institutional development, so who will allow, who will facilitate communication. And it's not sufficient to be a team of nice persons who would come together to discuss. Okay, may I suggest that other people, if they would like to join, pick up the microphone. Okay, but in short, I wanted to say that this is the institutionalized issues that we are carrying now. I don't think that right here, the moment, in the format of this roundtable, we could bring up some solutions, but the final thing I wanted to add is that the most important thing is to not to waste time and to create as soon as possible the digital interface for different protected zones and areas, so that this interface, this database would be accessible not only to the officials of the government and some formal parties, but to anybody. And I think that this calls for immediate actions. I would also sign under each word. I think that operators of big data still feel the skill of upgrading this big data and exchanging it. And I don't know what to do then with this data of the protected areas. I would suggest that there shouldn't be one driver. There should be the meeting at some platform. I'm ready to say that we would be ready to provide this platform. We are open to the dialogue. We can involve all the stakeholders, and this communication could start. Well, on the outcomes of these 2 days, you have prepared the presentation, and it would be a pity if we wasted and not given you time to make this presentation. Could you please, in a couple of words, now brief us on what you have summarized in your presentation? Yeah, we will put it on the screen. Nature tourism, the players and the aims. I will start with saying that I have learned much, and the knowledge which I have gained here should be translated into some practical actions. And when answering your questions, I tried to express that I'm trying to see it from the bird's eye view and show the panoramic vision of this conference, which brought together different interests and quite often featured the lack of understanding or dialogue. We have mentioned this already. And I would suggest, after we have entered the discussions of institutionalized agenda and some other issues, I would say that for me, it is much more clear right now, personally, that there is an objective that every time when there is a new project in nature tourism, it needs to be assessed. And nobody could put it nicer than Peter Spitzenok, who said, and I borrowed this from last year's conference, this quotation, that to start tourism without the right estimation is the crime. So which estimations do we need? Which assessments? First of all, commercial assessments. Second, environmental assessment. And in this manner, the objective is just to define by which parameters do we need to assess tourism when we develop nature tourism, and which specifics should be taken into consideration, and which parameters should be crucial for the project and which are less important, and which species that are in danger of becoming extinct, and so on. So these are the ecological, environmental parameters. And also the cluster of socioeconomic parameters are important, because this assessment should cover the regional authorities interested in developing the quality of life in the region. And when tourism is developing successfully, that creates the prestige and positive image of the region. And this will attract more business, more investment, more people, because people strive to settle where they like not only to work, but also to have quality leisure time. So of course the authorities also should be involved, local, regional authorities. But having said that, I would say that when estimations of this sort are in place, we need to understand as a result of this assessment if we are discussing the creation of some cluster or routes or trails or whatever, or the entire system, we should understand what is the catch, what is the benefit for the region, and how we can measure these benefits and the attainability of this. And these are the parameters, like environmental parameters, socio-economic parameters, and commercial parameters. They should be estimated not just once, but regularly and every time. And I understand it more clearly, having discussed it with colleagues, that this happens quite often just on the initiative of the local agents, and quite often they are translated in practical decisions. But quite often many parameters are left unobserved or unexplored, and the importance is to make all these estimations, all these assessments most efficient with reliance on the past experience. This is a quite challenging task because the protected areas are varied. Each has its own specifics, its own spectrum of species. The ecosystem is written. The protected reserve in one place can be absolutely different from a reserve in a different location. So different species are protected there. But the question is then who should be in charge of implementation of this task of arranging the assessments? Of course, the customer, should be the one who understands the practical use of this assessment. This can be the authorities who can see from their experience that that's important. But quite often it is the business, because the business is no less interested in positive solutions and finding the efficient ways of development, because once the project is starting, and if there are lots of gaps in the answers to the questions raised, then the business is trying to resolve them. But with the lack of data, so the business tries to do the functions or deliver the functions which is not by nature the functions of a business, but the function of research or environment or whatever. And the model should be the system which is based on the modern technologies, which is the center or the interface which collects different data, research, and so on. So basically, I have already mentioned it, that we need the core, and there is a list of functions here on the slides which the customer could deliver. And speaking about the research and development, for example, let's take the case given in this slide. So there are customers like the resort Rosa Hutar, for example, and our project office participated in finding solutions on their order to the existing issues. So we can make a list of things that have been very positive, but there are also initiatives from above, from the ministry, and we could consider our center as a best practice or the case which suggests to launch a project of realization of different functions that are ordered by the customer, and we can suggest something, and if this is applicable, then our government might consider this approach really a good model and will multiply it. So we can, am I right in understanding that there is no limitation on who and which project can put on for the contest. Yeah, there will be the competition, and competition papers are being designed, but as who can be the participant of this competition? We are ready to consider all the applicants, because we need to understand who has which concerns, and there are perhaps concerns of the same nature, and then we would identify the most relevant. But when we approach it from a different direction, we are not going to give grants to the research which already is supported by grants, because many research projects are efficient and underway and very fruitful, but our objective is to support the research which would tackle the particular practical objectives for the particular protected area, to build some model which will be able to predict what will happen within a particular period of time if the tourist flow increases as a result of introduction of some product and so on, and how to estimate the final product impact and so on. So, and then we could also identify those who could be the best providers of this work, so that not to just conduct research and report on it, but to bring it into the area of finding the executors of the next set of objectives. Because we understand today that nature that we have in Russia is our wealth. This is not too pathetic to say, because COVID-19 has shown it to us that now we are in a much better position in Russia because of nature. We do not go crazy. We find solutions through having access to nature. So that's why we right now have to be aware that our projects that really are very important, and that's why our initiative is to somehow arrange the entire process where there are right players, right funds to the right purpose, and arrange it, and not only arrange but also fund it, because we do have the budget. We have agreed it with our board that we are ready to contribute some portion of funds, some money to the projects that will win this competition. And what about this competition? Where can we learn about this? So this is the slide, which is the appeal to our colleagues who face particular objectives and who need some socioeconomic and environmental research to be done. And if they're interested, they can submit their bids. And even before the competition is in the form of the documents outlining all the rules and deadlines and so on. So we are ready to talk to you. We are ready to get involved in your processes, because we feel we are part of this entire big agenda, and we are very much interested in finding the solutions to this problem. But we need to understand what are the priorities, what are the problems that do exist, and then we will come up with the design of these competition papers very shortly. And I would mention that the resort Rosa Hutor would be one of the main players, because the colleagues came up with this suggestion to participate in the initiative, to share, and they are ready to share their experience and their objectives and their awareness, and how they envisage that this initiative and this expertise that they have could be put to use of others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please wait for the microphone. Good afternoon. Leonid Prochenko, Federal Center for Youth and Children Tourism and Regional Studies. I have just one comment. Please don't take as I criticize you. We love criticism. Yeah, just my comment is, fantastic story that your presentation bring, but I would love to offer to include in the discussion and educational and raising awareness approach. If we speak about children and youth, then indeed we face this demand in awareness and education of children. So if we speak about the scientific and research, environmental and sociological and research that meet the educational tasks, and I here do not speak about the environmental roots as providing for conditions and environment to make sure we will have tourists. But I would like to give attention to our audience, to children. We, as part of the Federal Ministry of Education, would love to have this result. It would be a good matter for us to present to the ministry from our side, and this should be a good instrument to promote roots. And for us, indeed, the main idea is to plan educational model as part of this system with scientific and research approach. And I would like to kindly ask to have slide number 2. So the key players and stakeholders of the industry and environmental community, then state public institutions and reserves and protected areas. If we include educational institutions as main stakeholders, not as the industry stakeholder, but one of the key players, then the environmental tourism, if it is considered by the scientific community of the ministry that I've mentioned as a stakeholder, then it will be easier for us to solve our objectives, to reach for our objectives. So that's my comment. Very good comment, and this very efficient criticism that is brought is something that we welcome very much, and I'm sure this is not the only comment you can contribute our session with. So please send us your feedback and ideas. Science doesn't come without education, as well as education doesn't come without science. It's unbelievable if it was like that, because they come together, and that's why, with everything that I've shared today, regarding the strategy of scientific and research development, every time we consider a new field of studies, we include education. Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor to Dmitry Gorshkov, and I here take advantage of my status. So I'm interested. Foundation or the preserve that you've been the head of, what do you think? Is it of demand to have the scientific models? Are we right with trying to determine the problems and challenges? Is that correct? Or is it part of your agenda? Because there are so many models of environment and ecology studies. Sometimes they're very targeted, somewhere they're part of the global agenda. So what is your perception? Is there any demand for this? Yes, we have the demand in this field. One of the fields of the reserve sphere is the provision of data to make sure the right managerial decisions are made. So preserves, national parks, we need to work with the scientific data, we need to track the changes, and it refers to the environmental tourism as well. And here we must say that we need to draw conclusions and to make sure it's a consecutive process, and we need to forecast, we need to pre-plan something, and some of the preserves can be of a full self-operated system, but some reserves may not have enough human resources and professionals that are able to work with this data and in this manner with digital data and so on. So there is a demand, there is a need, there are requirements, but it differs from side to side. And as long as I have the microphone, I have questions. So, do you plan to limit the geography of applications, or you plan to work through the country? And how do you plan to distribute information about this contest? And how do you plan to reach the protected areas with this information? I'll start with the second question again. So I think we'll distribute a press release to inform the management of the preserved areas. We have a plan to do it in first hand, and the circle of those who are able and must be involved should be defined. And here we need to understand what do we want and what can we do. So we speak about the pilot project, and it can be the beginning of something more than that, of something else, and then maybe at the end the task will be solved by state instruments. But we want to prove that it is a living thing, it can work, and then it can become a tool. And then we want to prove by our pilot, by our model, that it is an efficient tool. And here, I don't think me as the author should define who will be the consumers of the system, but the experts that we have met, and in particular, we plan a partnership with Rosa Huta Resort. So I think we should discuss this with our partners, with professionals from the industry. From another side, we have understanding what principles we should base our operations on. And now I would like to give the floor to Dmitry. So thank you. Kirill Akaki, thank you very much. I would like to stress the things that we discuss right now, they are at the table right now, and we do discuss them at the moment. And I'm so happy that this discussion is in place right now, and this momentum, and right at the final stage of our conference. And I feel how the energy is boosting and gets together to have it born. So we had a discussion yesterday, and we discussed what challenges and problems we face here in Krasnaya Polyana, and to detail this discussion and answering your question on geography and how you bring more participants to the network, I would like to offer the following. These 3 conferences that we have in a row from year to year, we try to bring the voices of the industry and the protected areas field together to highlight the needs to bring more experts from institutions of Russia, of international environment, to bring people together, to raise awareness, to raise the voices. And now we need to use this brilliant opportunity that is given to us by this platform, by having all the experts around one round table. So if we consider Rosa Huta to be the leader in this sphere and to trying to drive this agenda, then the second partner in designing of the technical requirement, in trying to find the right solution of the problem, in the way of shaping this problematic of scientific research, the second stakeholder should be the scientific community. And for many years, Russia, Russia's voice in environmental studies. For many years, it has been the office of the international community in the Russian office. So I think we have a good opportunity, good plot, good common grounds for the future development and dialogue. Right now, the contest is not shaped yet, so we may have to have trilateral meetings to try to distribute the roles, to delegate the tasks, and not to impose everything on us, on Rosa Huta, but to invite a very strong player from the side of the global family of preserved areas, and I mean, as I've mentioned, the World Wild Nature Fund, Wildlife Fund. So WWF is the voice of the global community of protected areas, and for many years in Russia, the office of WWF was the one to name all the difficulties, gaps, and challenges. So if we bring this third party to our discussion, should be great, should be very efficient, helpful. So I hope the leader of WWF in Russia will step in and work with us. So thank you very much. I'm so happy to hear these comments from your side, and I'm so happy that it's not only me that I answer, that I offer something, that I step in with some offers, but I'm happy we have this feedback. But if we have an instrument, then it can be the beginning of a dialogue and the beginning for the development in this field. It is expected we will come up with this supervisory board, and the board will coordinate the work of the experts and professionals, and I encourage the representatives of all the different stakeholders to step into the discussion and work. And I think, and here I would like to take your question, as for the geography, whom will we invite to the discussion? I hope it will not be decided not by initiators as myself, but by expert community, people like you, by experts, but people from the industry, because you know better than anyone what problems you face and where you can bring a better result. And we base our perspective on our experience and background. And I assume we should choose geography based on maximum implementation of the methods. Probably would be more efficient, and here it's my offer, only my suggestion, and I feel that we've come to common grounds and we found the right common language, and if our expert supervisory board is able to solve these issues, then the instrument is proved to be efficient, it will be of demand by us, and we'll be enjoying and experiencing good feedback from above, from the state. So Dmitry, what do you think about invitation for given to WWF? What do you think? What about the suggestion and invitation? Well, of course, I want to have more details and information on what is planned, because right now it's the very first step and the initial information, and I cannot make the final decision based on that. But in any ways, it's very helpful, and we, as the representative, as the voice of the protected areas globally, can participate and contribute to the efficiency and fruitful work and cooperation. Yes, we'll consider it. So thank you very much. So maybe we have some suggestions or propositions. Akaki, this is your first time in the conference, and you are a physicist. So what are your impressions, and what about the what about your perception of our event? This professional environmental professionals and experts meet together. So how does it feel? I feel comfortable. I feel I belong to this conference quite right. Who are scientists? Scientists are having this drive, this energy, and there's a light inside them that takes them where they are. They want to research, they want to spend their life in doing helpful things for the society. And here I meet my brothers in science, my partners in science, and birds of a feather flock together, and I feel natural here. I see the same people of my kind, of my nature, and I know the stories how people spend their lives and they give their lives for the science. And here at this conference, I feel I meet people of the same nature, of the same kind, and I feel it will be done in a right manner. And from what I've learned during these years, the days, I feel that we'll be able to succeed, and I appreciate experience of my colleagues that I've witnessed here at this conference, and I'm very happy I've been part of this conference. So we from our side hope that the scientific community will help us and contribute to our industry. So we hope that the scientific community can become a mediator between these two very sides being in confrontation, protected areas and business. And I feel that it's quite a good and very positive energy that starts here. So thank you very much. And here we close our session. Thank you very much.